Alexandros, give me the elevator speech about your book.
Okay, I will try. Well, my main theme of the book is a comparison, a critical comparison between the philosophy of Martin Heidegger and the philosophy of Cornelius Castoriadis. It begins with the deep question of Heidegger's involvement with Nazi politics, being a member of the Nazi Party and actively working to promote Nazi university structures, while he is also considered to be one of the most influential and important philosophers of the 20th century. This is a very deep problem that has been avoided by Heidegger himself, who during his lifetime, and has been defended by his disciples in one way or another, like a mistake from a deep thinker who was naive in politics, or like something that he was too embarrassed to apologize about later on. The issue is that there are some thinkers that have expressed the problem that his leaning to nationalistic and ethnocentric racist politics is inherent in his philosophical stance. And that is the important issue. Because Heidegger is invaluable in his thinking around human existence and our place in time. He is invaluable in stressing out that we create time. Time is not imposed to us. We are a source of temporality, as individuals, but also as social beings. However, these insights did not lead him towards an appreciation of human communication, of human solidarity, and of humanity as that. He led them on a different path, on an isolationist, elitist, intellectualist path like Plato, where he isolated himself from humanity, trying to take a messianic, I would say, revelationist stance towards being. By doing that, he subordinates human being towards a concept of abstract being, a godless, however volatile kind of superconsciousness, we'll say, a being that imposes itself on history. And that being, in my opinion, is that conception of being is responsible for his politics as well. And it's a dangerous conception. It is dangerous because it's complementary with the main imaginary significances of the system, meaning isolationism, elitism, and disregard for mass communication, disregard for human solidarity and human collectivity. On the other hand, Castoriadis is a radical thinker who promotes the project of autonomy and has also shares some insights with Heidegger. He also posits that we create temporality and that human existence is a historical existence, an existence within time that creates time. But he takes another path, and his path is towards the project of autonomy, social ecology, human solidarity. Castoriadis posits that the issue with traditional philosophy is the ecological, individualistic, and subjective stance. He posits that between the subject and the world, nature, stands the field of society and history, the social historical field, which is the field of language, communication, signification, meaning. He points out that we are not born adult males, but we are born as children in a family or a society which nurtures us according to specific values. And he points out that these values are society's own creations. So he points out the self-institution of society and tries to find the possibility of autonomy during the critical, questioning of dominant significances. So I find that Castoriadis' road leads us to a new appreciation of human collectivity and our struggles for emancipation. Whereas Heidegger's road leads us to isolationism, passivity, and more or less how can I say, an appreciation and a positive stance towards hierarchy and sovereignty and power. I think that it's very important to see these differences. Castoriadis himself talked about Heidegger, and his assessment was it is very peculiar for any philosopher, but Heidegger has black holes where Eros, the psyche, and the city, the polis, should be. Heidegger does not think about on these issues. However, if Heidegger's influence was not so widespread, even in radical circles, this would not be an issue. However, it is an issue, given that one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century was naive enough or obscure enough to not only, how can I say, to keep a blind eye on reactionary politics, but also to support reactionary politics. And it is, in my opinion, very peculiar that people read Heidegger without shedding light on that dimension of his thought. In my opinion, philosophy, political philosophy and social philosophy, has this how to say, political and social philosophy is important as a means of guiding our practices, of guiding our way of treating each other and our political actions. We cannot we cannot take away the moral and political dimension of any philosophical thought without a cost. I think that there is a systemic tendency towards depoliticizing philosophy, and I find that Heidegger's influence is very strong in this issue. So in my book, I tried to make this confrontation come alive, the confrontation of ideas, and in this context to wonder about the specific issues that are of highly importance for us today, like the issues of the failure of representative institutions, the issues of the struggle for autonomy in parts in the periphery of the Western world, the issues of what is the meaning of politics and democracy, and of course in the last chapter I try to delve into more contemporary issues that neither Heidegger nor Castoriadis experienced, but however had some precognitions about that, meaning the issue of cybernetics, the digital revolution, and the social transformations that are connected with the internet.
Can you give me some real-world examples of the influence of Heidegger's ideas in many radical circles that you do find disturbing?
Well,
some examples. Yeah.
Yes, one example of Heidegger's influence on left-wing thinkers is, for example, Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism, which was politically devoted to many causes of the left without a consistent stance, position, I would say. His Sartre's known dictum from a theatrical play that hell is other people, I think is on the roots of Heideggerian existentialism. The other people are a threat to my freedom, the other people are a threat to my authenticity. Heidegger stresses the issue of authenticity as if there is an authentic being of me that is obscured by the presence of others. And I think that some concepts of mistrust towards the people or mistrust towards the public that are apparent in Sartre's existentialism is rooted in Heideggerian impulses. I know that because Sartre also was had a conversation with Heidegger, he was also aware of that, but I think this is one example. Another example are some ultra, how how can I say, some configurations by Michel Foucault. For example, his thought that power is everywhere, and his thought that whenever a revolutionary cause is successful, he just results in another dominion, in another structure of dominance. I find that this has the tendency to paralyze social activity, because if you think that you also, by being against power, you serve, by being against authority, you serve another nascent authority, then this is, how can I say, a model for people not participating, for moving, for giving excuses to private life, to disappointment. Of course, I can find other. A more modern example is Georgian Gaben, who is Heideggerian. He was also a student of Heidegger's thought, and his appreciation on the issue of power and authority as well is also Foucauldian. Results again in resentment, because he believes that any discourse hides how can I say, a tendency to domination, a will of power, if you prefer in Nietzschean terms. So this is also paralyzing on political action. I believe that one of the main ideas behind democratic politics or revolutionary radical politics is the idea that together, on an equal and democratic way, we can find other structures of power and other solutions. And it is based on the concept that authority is not the only form of governmental power that a society could adopt. There could be shared forms of power, which is not against personal autonomy, and they are, on the contrary, the preconditions of personal autonomy. Social autonomy, Castoriadis says, is a precondition for personal autonomy. So I think that if these influences, which tend to be more, I can say, anarcho-individualistic, Stirnerian, in the left, are driven by some Heideggerian impetus, by some Heideggerian readings. And I was very, what struck me as very peculiar is that in Greece, Heidegger has been adopted by many radical thinkers without criticizing, without critique. Especially Heidegger's denial of technical sciences, his denial of industrial civilization. Heidegger has a specific core in his thought, which is pre-modern, agrarian, and nostalgic of what we would say national communities, a Volkist strand. Unfortunately, this Volkist strand find resonance with some European movements that have left-wing roots, but are moving towards more nationalistic tendencies. And I think this is, I don't know, say, apparent in the philosophical landscape. And we could speak about more, because this is from people that we could recognize as radical thinkers, thinkers that are anti-state, anti-systemic, at least in their thought. If we go to the conservative thinkers, then we can find that there are many non-religious thinkers that are not Christian-based, for example, that are Heideggerian in an aggressive way. For example, one of them, I don't know if it is known to our circles, but it's Nick Land, which is one of the proponents of accelerationism, which is an idea that we should accelerate the technological advantages in order to promote more progressive systems of domination, because domination is in human's nature, according to his. He speaks about a dark enlightenment. Heidegger is a major figure of the anti-enlightenment movement, of the reactionary mind, and of the reactionary tradition. He's one of the most of the leading figures in the philosophy anti-enlightenment, anti-humanist as well. And we can find the seeds of his thought in various movements, like like existentialism, in the individualistic traits of existentialism, the individualistic traits of communitarianism, the nationalistic traits of communitarianism, and the traits, the anti-humanist traits of transhumanism, accelerationism, and other. I would like to point out, just because it's a distinctive episode for the history of philosophy, but also a distinctive chapter in the book, the relationship between Heidegger and Hannah Arendt, which is a multifaceted relationship. It was they were lovers. Before Heidegger became a Nazi, she was a student of his. They became lovers while he was married, and when he became a Nazi, she left for the US in order because he was a Jew. After the war, she highly criticized his position, but when they met again in person, she became one of his supporters. And this is a very, complex story, which I try to unravel, because Hannah Arendt is one of the most important radical thinkers, especially against totalitarianism, and her relationship with Heidegger is a very provides us with a problem that is beyond politics. It is and it's rooted in interpersonal, intersubjective community.
Okay, in fact, I was going to say, what was the most surprising thing you learned writing this book?
Yeah. The relations between Arendt and Heidegger is one of the the initial questions that turned me to the research for the book.
Okay, so yeah.
Because I was studying the intersubjective temporality of eros, of erotic relationship, which in my opinion is a distinct, discrete form of temporality that is neither subjective, but nor public, nor common. It is the erotic temporality between two people. And I was very interested in the erotic communication between those two incompatible people. And Arendt was also a sincere thinker. She was not a thinker that avoided confrontation. And so I was very interested in what was that Arendt found important in Heidegger's thought. What was the issue that attracted her as a thinker, not as a woman, as a person, but as a thinker, because she tries to justify not his position, but his importance. So that was one important question. Of course, like any love relationship, we can only examine it externally and without ever knowing what was between them. Mm-hmm. However, we can see it as an example of how Arendt formulated another philosophy, a philosophy that respects the city and the other, because whereas Heidegger formulated his philosophy on the feeling of angst, anxiety, and loneliness, Arendt formulated her philosophy on the feeling of love. Whereas Heidegger formulated his philosophy on the concept of death, we know that we will die, Arendt formulated her philosophy on the concept of birth. We are born. So this is something also that is very interesting. But however, the thing that was found most disturbing while I was researching the book was the fact that Paul Celan, the Jewish poet, survivor of Auschwitz, and the only poet that could write after Auschwitz, he wrote some very, very great poems, moving poems about that situation. He decided to go and visit Heidegger in his cabin of isolation, Heidegger after the war isolated himself in a cabin in the woods. Celan visited Heidegger and stayed with him for 3 days. So we have the poet survivor of Auschwitz and the Nazi philosopher meeting there for 3 days, and Heidegger did not respond to any of the questions of Paul Celan. I mean, that was shocking for me, because I can understand the abstract, how someone can isolate himself from the pain of others, because they're just ideas in his mind. He's not there, he does not see what's happening. So I can say, okay, he was not a man who was sensitive to the pain of others, but he did not see that. But how could he remain silent in front of the poet who experienced that, and not only experienced that, had the humility and the humanity to go and give to that philosopher the chance to apologize? I mean, it was a unique in a lifetime chance to apologize, even if nobody learned about that. But he didn't take that. So that was very...
That's a shocking story.
Yes, it was shocking for me. It was shocking for me. And Arendt speaks about the tyranny of thought, the tyranny of thinking. He says that some great thinkers have a tendency towards tyranny. But for me, this is the exact opposite of critical thought. Critical thought is a way to escape tyranny, to open up in the freedom of questioning. So, I think as someone who deals with the history of philosophy, I think that these are very important questions that need to be posed, and we need to discuss about them. For example, if I was dealing with the history of poetry, a similar question would be the question of Ezra Pound. How can such a big poet be such an awful human?
Book, but I'm sure there's a connection you can make. So how should we treat intellectual truths from thinkers who also hold abhorrent opinions? Should those opinions nullify any positive contributions they may have made? In other words, is redemption possible for an intellectual?
Well, that's a very deep question. And I think there are many dimensions to unfold in this question. The first thing is the relationship between creator and his work. We know the work, we appreciate the work, and is there any need to know the creator? What if the work is valuable? It becomes independent from the creator, and its value resides within itself. So there we can justify ourselves by reading, for example, thinkers of the past and not treating them as slave owners, which they were. Of course, this is one easy solution, which is just sidesteps the main problem. The main problem is what you asked. The main problem is how can an individual share some invaluable insights about the human condition and at the same time support abhorrent views on the same issue, the human condition. That is the issue, and that rests on our demands about what a sincere intellectual should be. I mean, the idea of an intellectual. What is that? What is it? For example, we do not have such demands from physics or from positive sciences. But when we have a scientist, a thinker, that tries to think and reflect on the human condition, then we cannot just take one part of his thought without, we cannot divide his thought in isolated pieces. Even if we try to do that, we will find that there are some roots that take us back to other paths. So we need a critical assessment, and we need to be, I think, we need to be stern, and we need to have, how can I say, demands from the thinkers that we give our time to. because we're all humans, and we're all trying to think on the same condition, albeit in different conditions every time, but on the same condition of restraints, as we would say, and how can I say, and limited time and limits. So if we take any thinker as an authority, then we denounce our own critical thinking. I have found that the best way to read philosophy is like a conversation with a friend. Someone who may have found some truths, but he found them being a human being, being a limited human being. So we should treasure them because it is something that we can share. Whereas if we think of any thinker as a guru or as an authority, and as a wise man, then we remain silent in front of him. And I say him because in the Western history, men have always taken this role of messianic thinker, and then he becomes an obscurance to our freedom. And that is then, by his own placement as an authority, questions his own thinking. That is what Socrates managed to avoid, and Plato condemned him to. I mean, Socrates managed to avoid being an authority, and that's why he's still relevant today, and avoided being a leader or being someone that stood beyond the others. He was a member of the Agora. He was a person of the council. He was someone who participated. It was his student Plato that took his eyes away from humanity and towards gods, placed God as an example, and began this history of political theology and political authority that has dominated philosophy.
In this internet age. So, okay, that's stopped though, so we can go ahead.
So, the internet. This is a new transformation of human existence, as in the context that I discuss it in the book. And in my last section, I try to move beyond what these philosophers have written to what their thoughts can help us understand for our modern world. I believe that the internet is an ontological revolution. What I mean that the creation of the digital world is a creation of a new level of human existence, coexistence and communication that is like the creation of a new field and of a new level of reality, which is of course rooted and very much determined by the surrounding social historical reality. But these alterations in human communication and human self-reception and self-critique, I believe, have opened a door that we cannot return back into. I am one of the people. We are of the generation that has bridged the world before digital communication to the digital world. But the new generations are born into this digital world. And we're just I'm trying to examine some of the transformations that had occurred. For example, one transformation is the importance of telepresence. Telepresence is my presence through an avatar. So a profile via the digital world, which is the, how can I say, the condition for telepresence is my absence from the absence of the physical me from the conversation. This creates a sense of public space, which is not public. It is inter-individual space. When we are in social media, we think that we speak to many people, but we speak to each one individually. There's not a square, there's not a market where we can shout and everybody hear us. And there is not the risk of corporeal presence, of being somatically there. But this risk is also a way of asserting your presence in public space. This risk of being physical there is one of the bases of human solidarity and political collectivity. This transformation to the internet, I think, moves beyond our capacity to evaluate it, because it moves rapidly, but has transferred some basic political and human interpersonal communicative modes to this impersonal, decorporealized, and isolationist way of communication. It's not the internet, it's the social media that does that. The Web 3.0, the third iteration of the web, which is feeding on interpersonal communication and not it's feeding on our personal time and not, how can I say, the working time. What about critical thinking? I think that the internet of social media, constructed as it is, based on the speed of the message and the brevity of the message, actually boosts the dominant ideas and stereotypes. For example, it is very easy to create a meme or a joke or a viral content if you just borrow the dominant stereotypes. For example, nationalism. This is not a stereotype that is created by social media. This is a stereotype that's created by public education, from where we were born, by being born in a nation state. The meme industry just uses the symbols that are more recognizable and promotes a discourse which is fast, which is short, and which aims at making an emotional response and not a rational response in order to promote an idea. It's much more easy to use a flag, which is recognizable, than to use something that is new, that is radical, that is anti-systemic, because this you have to explain. So there is no, in the world of social media, the time of conversation narrows while the field of communication expands. We have communications that are based on, how can I say, spontaneous fragments. Twitter. For example, Twitter is a model of that. What is very interesting for me is that this model of social media interaction starts with widespread. Now we have academic sites and academic networks that are formatted like the the Facebook, for example. I mean, this format spreads, and it creates a public that does not have the time to think, to ingest an idea and respond after having reconsidered that. We have a public that responds like instantly. And this is a response that, how can I say, actually destroys or degrades the field of critical discourse. Actually, it isolates everybody to what is his stereotypical way of perceiving. What are counterparts to that? For one, the format is not for critical and exposition and how can I say, discussion of ideas. So what I have seen, and for that the Black Lives Matter was very illuminating in that, is that the need for actual and physical participation in social movements is very important. It's urgent, especially in our time and day where digital communications tend to isolate us. It's more visible now, the physical participation. We can use that, rooting our physical participation in our local communities, but also using the internet global communication networks in order to widespread our message and find other communities on a global scale. This is one of the, how can I say, emancipating effects of digital communication. For example, there is this trend called cosmolocalism, where local autonomous communities remain in their localities, but their knowledge, their information, and their connections run on a global scale. For example, one type of cosmolocalist movement is the Kurdish movement of Rojava and the networks of solidarity around the world. This is very important. One other example of people using the internet for emancipatory purposes was the Zapatistas movement. It was the first time where the Zapatistas were the first that saw that how you can use digital communication to widespread the message by also transforming the message so that it can be understood by the wider public from different cultures. The way of projecting the message, but also not projecting, how can I say, a theoretical explanation only, but also an image of life, an image of another mode of life. The Zapatistas are very expert in this way of communicating their message. I think these are liberating aspects of the internet. And of course there is something liberating at the base of the internet, the issue of free information and free communication, and the issue of free access to humanity's knowledge, which is very important. It is not so visible in the works of advertisement and data, but because it is in the core of the internet, how can I say, projection, I believe it's still vivid. On the other hand, we should also pay attention to what Shoshana Zuboff said about surveillance capitalism, the use of personal data, and also the trends of personification used by big companies to create the illusion that all market is centered on me, which personification creates another form of isolation by enclosing me, the digital subject, in a prison of my likes and my preferences, by enclosing me in a world of information that reflect only what has been and has no space for anything new. All these trends are clashing, colliding together. We can see that both on everyday communication and on big politics like the electoral campaign in the United States and all that. I believe that it's still too early. I think that we are in the position like the Luddites were in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where they projected dystopias, some of which became true. For example, the alienation of the worker in the factory. But others did not, because there were also the movements of the workers against the alienation in the factory. So I always hope that these new challenges will provide new social movements and new ways of confronting these systemic paradoxes. For me, if I had to say, I prefer a world that has the internet because it provides us with more tools to escape, how can I say, to escape intellectual poverty, to escape the isolation of information. It provides means for the public to have access in what is human knowledge. This is very important, and I believe we should struggle for that and demand the internet as a basic human right. I believe that the internet, housing, energy, water, food, and education should be accepted as basic human rights like liberty is and all that.
That's great. Opinion on the neo-Luddite movements that are occurring?
Well, this is an issue that also brings us in the initial context of Castoriadis against Heidegger, because Heidegger was he was technophobic. He did not trust technology at all, and he made this dark prophecy that philosophy and critical thinking would be replaced by cybernetics, and the science of informational sciences. So there is a neo-Luddite strain in his thought. For once more, I tend to be more close with Castoriadis, who claims that technophobic arguments sometimes are obscure towards the real condition of science. Castoriadis watched carefully not only the advances on technological science, but the gaps in theoretical sciences. And he claims that there is a crisis in sciences which is not inherent in the scientific, progress, but it is determined by politics. He says, for example, this simple phrase, which for me was illuminating. He said that how can we evaluate progress of science when the American government decides to give $1 billion to the research for weapons and just 1 million to the research for health issues. He says that there is no science that is neutral. All science has inherited the systemic purposes that are inherited in that. But that doesn't mean that we should reject technology and science altogether, because the basis of sciences, the core, imaginary significance is free thinking, is free research, and is to share with the public. So the scientific spirit, as we would say, is an enlightening spirit. It's an emancipating spirit. We should not reject rationalism in order to move to irrationalism. Heidegger is a irrationalist. Castoriadis speaks about, I would say, a relative rationalism, in contrast to an absolute rationalism. He believes that we should respect the sciences in a critical way and criticize their purposes, try to find what purposes are enclosed in every technology, and try to find in what modes this technology could be changed or could be transformed towards serving the project of autonomy. One last phrase about that. As regards the internet, Heidegger said that philosophy will be replaced by cybernetics, whereas Castoriadis said in 1957 that information is not enough. People could have in their pockets the equivalent of a library, and now we do. But still not be informed. They will have just a notion of information that they wouldn't be able to critically evaluate. What we need, he said, is a democratic education, so we would have the means to understand what is the meaning of this information and take informed decisions. For Castoriadis, the issue of democracy is for the public, for the people to be able to self-govern themselves in an informed and direct and critical way. He always said that we have to be informed and deliberative in our decisions. So the internet is a good thing, you're saying, because it gives us access to all this information. But then social media is actually damaging to it because it reduces our ability to actually think critically. Exactly, yes. I think that social media and these modes of individual communication that have dominated the internet is a way of privatizing what should be common. So it's kind of a neoliberal kind of... Neoliberal, yes. It's a neoliberalization of it. Yeah, and if we see the history of the internet, we can see the exact policies implemented by the American government in order to move the internet from the academic but also common and free space that it began. For example, Tim Berners-Lee, the man who created the World Wide Web, did not ask for intellectual rights because he did not believe in intellectual rights. He's still alive, but he is a scientist, so that he wanted to share his innovation with everybody. And it was his way of thinking. There are many scientists who are liberal in their minds, but they work in structures that are not. But he did that. But 5 years later, Bill Clinton signed a deal that gave the telecommunication apparatus from which was belonged to the universities and the American public state. He gave them to private companies, to telecommunication companies. So this was the first step to the privatization of the apparatus of the internet, the structure. This was, in 2001, Google, which was a search engine, they found out that they could use the data, the data that came from the searches in order to individualize the advertisement to the public, and then and thus became the extraction of profit from our own content. It's the first machine in human economy that manages to extract surplus value from our communication just by our speaking, not by our producing anything. And it's very, very, very...
It's like a closing of the digital commons.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
This is a perfect segue then into the question of these personal communication, this social movement building that you're involved in with the Athens School Project.
Oh.
Maybe you can tell me a little bit about the Athens School Project that you're involved with.
Yeah. Well, the Athens School is a cooperation that is an educational cooperative because it is our way of limited, however practical and response to the lack of education that we found around us. We found that there is a lack of sharing of our knowledge and experiences, and there is a division of human knowledge that is more systemic than we would like. So we started the Athens School as a place to hold the free seminars around technique, carpentry, for example, and instrument making, art, theater, and theory, philosophy. However, we have a very specific, I would say, orientation. We think that this educational program is inspired by the ideas of Castoriadis, by the ideas of Bookchin, by the ideas of social ecology. We were trying to create an interdisciplinary place of education in order to educate ourselves to confront the big issues that we face, in order to create, how can I say, a knowledge from below that relies on both scientific research, on our own personal experiences, but also on a philosophical and political project that recognizes that representative democracy is not democracy, that we need to move to a direct democracy, and we need to innovate in order to find solutions to the problems that are presented by the system and the distraction we follow around us. And we have found very interesting things. For example, we have found the deep connections between carpentry, ecology, and theory. It's very different to speak about the social ecology in the midst of a wood, of a forest, with the people that are working in the wood and the carpenters, and trying to explain the cycle of the tree and how important it is for our human civilization, not just for as a product. And we found also that there is how can I say, an accumulated experience in tradition that is not that does not have to do with what we say tradition, the tradition of authority, the tradition of the the instituted authorities, but the tradition of coexistence of people that tried to find solutions in solidarity and in direct communication, and did. That is very important for us. So it's also a way to escape this neoluddism without being, how can I say, dazzled by the innovations of cutting-edge technology. We like to reevaluate the meaning of art, technique, and technology for free and convivial and solidarity human existence. We need to scale down and find other solutions. And of course, that's why Athens School has the three educational sectors: theory, art, and technique, but also has the fourth section that is called Eco School, where we take tours in situ in areas that have been degraded ecologically, that face risks, and try to connect with movements there, and try to share our knowledge and our mutual knowledge, and provide a sense of recorded, how can I say, experience and knowledge on these issues that would be useful to us and future projects as well. It's also a project that we would like to expand in collaborations with other efforts around the world, similar, and tries also to, it takes inspiration from other such efforts in the fields of the commons and solidarity economy and grassroots movements. It is not our effort, of course, you can understand, is deeply politically, how can I say, concerned. But we are not trying to create a political party or a political collectivity. These are other structures that have other. We're trying to make like an independent school of thought that would be self-sustained, open to the public, and would promote different configurations about our relationship with knowledge. We'd like to break down this isolation of knowledge to the academy and provide access. So we're open to collaborations and discussions on that issue. We also have a small editing house, publishing house, but it is these all are, I would say, are a part of a greater constellation of radical houses, of efforts that may communicate, may not, but all are part of a global effort to create a different meaning of life. And I think that one of the good things of the internet is that it makes us aware that we are not alone in this effort and that there are other things. For example, in Montreal, Milton Park, the Greek police is very violent, and it is very unhinged among the European police, and it has no respect because it has no punishable. So it's very easy for anyone to be caught in a violent conflict in Greece, even if he is a peaceful demonstrator, even if he is not in the demonstration. If we see the incidents of police brutality in Greece, we can see that it is inherent, because, and I will say that historical information was the last thing. The Greek police was founded in 1833 by French officers of the Algerian colonial regiments there, and it was designed as a tool to control a population that was, how can I say, as an occupied country. So we don't have this identification with any police in Greece. Even the conservatives don't that. There is an inherent anti-police sentiment, which isn't necessarily emancipatory, but it provides, how can I say, a field of direct conflict in every time. So it is a violent politics without much space for self-determination in Greece.
That's great. This was a perfect, fantastic interview. Very, very,
Thank you very
informative.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Alexandros.
much. It was very nice speaking to you.